These filings you mentioned, like coming up with your facts and your theories, right? A lot of this is speculative. So like the importance of record keeping is so critical in these cases. If only there was a piece of software that kept track of all this, Rich.
I feel like I've heard about one. I don't know. Welcome to Restaurant 365 Presents Behind the Numbers, a show where we talk to restaurant owners, operators, chefs, managers, CFOs, and everybody in between about what makes successful restaurants tick. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe to the show wherever you're watching or tuning in. And please consider leaving us a review. Those reviews continue to help us bring you these incredible guests, these awesome conversations, and also helps the podcast continue to grow. And with that, I'm your host, Rich Sweeney.
And I'm Mark Cohen, and we're excited to be here today with Anthony Zaller, founding partner at Zaller Law Group, PC. Anthony helps businesses and entrepreneurs navigate California's very complex employment and business laws. He's got over 20 years of experience in employment defense litigation. He's successfully represented clients in various industries such as restaurants, hospitality, tech, hotel, and professional services in cases involving wage and hour class actions, wrongful terminations, harassment, intellectual property, and unfair compensation. We are going to get into the weeds today. All right, Anthony, welcome to Behind the Numbers. Let's dig in.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. Hi, Rich. Yeah, this is awesome. You guys are doing the podcast, and thanks for inviting me on to be on it. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, you bring a unique angle to this, right? We've mostly been talking to CFOs, CEOs, chefs. So we wanted to get sort of you have a very unique take on a very specific part of the industry that has always been, I feel like, a hot topic. So I'm curious from your perspective right now, what is sort of the most important things operators should be focused on with regards to their employees?
Yeah. So, and that's what I like about being an employment defense attorney. I get to help on the business side. I've got a business background, have an MBA and everything. But I like the legal side, that being a litigator and doing that as well. And it's a good mix. And I don't get to say this a whole lot in California, but since June of last year till now, it's actually been a pretty good environment for California employers. Obviously, there's still a lot of regulations, but we're getting some relief on one of the biggest issues facing operators, especially restaurants here in California, with the PAGA reform that went through in June of 2024. And that relief has really been understated by the media, everybody that's covering it. And I don't know why lawyers aren't out touting this reform as much. This has really been a huge benefit for California operators. And again, it's not a windfall. The employers have to do some active steps to get the benefit. But if they're doing these active steps, which, by the way, they should have been doing anyway, the PAGA penalties are capped at 15% of what the plaintiff's attorney could recover. 15%, they're capped at that. It's a huge benefit for employers, but they do have to be taking these proactive steps. So that in alone has been huge. It's probably been the biggest, since I've been practicing law, going back to 2003, that's probably one of the biggest reforms I've seen and the benefits for California operators.
Well, for people that are listening that might not be familiar with PAGA, what can you go into detail on this?
Yeah. So, and I'll keep it pretty high level too, so we don't put everybody to sleep here. But if you're an operator, it's something that a lot of operators know this area very well. I'm really surprised when I talk to some of my clients. They know this better than some lawyers know it, especially if you're not an employment defense lawyer or employment attorney. But PAGA stands for the Private Attorneys General's Act, and it's this very unique law that was passed in California going back to 2003. It was passed in 2003 by Gray Davis as he was being recalled. I think it was one of the last bills he actually signed, just as Governor Schwarzenegger was taking over. And it didn't get a whole lot of attention by the employment defense litigators at the time. And the reason for that is the class actions, wage and hour class actions, were just gaining steam. They were in the start, they had been around for a while, but really gaining steam here in California. So everybody focused on the class actions, and that's where the money was for the plaintiff's attorneys.
Right.
And so these PAGA claims are kind of tag along claims. And what PAGA allows for, and what it does, the state was running out of money back in 2003, like it's running out of money right now in 2025. But the labor commissioner didn't have the resources to go out and enforce the labor code provisions that it has power to enforce. So the labor code, California labor code, has these certain provisions that designates civil penalties that only the labor commissioner could enforce against employers. So it's these penalties, $100 per pay period, $200 per pay period per employee for these various violations.
But it adds up.
It adds up. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And then before PAGA was passed, nobody was enforcing this basically because the labor commissioner had just a handful of people to cover the whole state. And I don't know exactly how many people they had, but it wasn't a whole lot. You never heard of the labor commissioner coming in to enforce PAGA civil penalties. So what PAGA did, the law said a private attorney can get a client, and if the client suffered a violation, a labor code violation, that private attorney could basically step into the shoes of the labor commissioner and enforce these civil code penalties against employers on behalf of all of the employees. And so it gave the plaintiff's bar a lot of authority to go and start enforcing these civil code provisions against employers. Now, it didn't get a lot of traction at first. It was tag along, and they didn't like it because it was they'd rather get the money under the class actions.
Right. Bigger payout.
Yep. But on the federal level, the U.S. Supreme Court started building in teeth to class action waivers used in arbitration agreements. So employers started implementing class action waivers in arbitration agreements. So you saw a lot less class actions being filed. So here in California, though, the plaintiff's bar just put the blinders on about these class action waivers and said, okay, you can waive a class action, but you can't waive a PAGA claim, and we're still going to proceed with PAGA claims. And that's where this has kind of grown. And then the number of PAGA cases is just growing substantially over the years.
We were talking about this initially. This whole process gets kicked off with like a letter, right? They've got to write a formal letter to the Attorney General. And how many of those have been filed?
Yeah, so they have to start it off with a letter to the LWDA, basically the labor commissioner. And then that letter goes to the labor commissioner. The employer has to be CC'd on that letter. And the plaintiff has to set out their facts and theories in that letter. And I'll get back to why that's important here in a minute. But going back, went back and tracked this last year during the reform, 2016. It's public record, so we went back and searched this. About 3,700 were filed in 2016. In 2024, last year, we had over 10,000 of these filed.
So this reform's coming at a good time, it sounds like. It's needed.
But it's a little unnerving, though. The reform went through last year. You expect that number to start going down, but we've just seen that number is still going up. And let me pull up some numbers. One anomaly, though, that we saw last year, before the reform went through in June, we saw a huge increase of these PAGA letters being filed. The plaintiff's bar heard the reform might go through, so they started filing all the cases that they had to try to beat the reform. And so we saw a huge uptick in June. But with that said, so let me give you an example. In January of 2024, we saw about 800 PAGA letters filed. And then in December of 2024, it was right at 731. Okay. So they started ticking back up. Okay. And so employers aren't off, scot-free here. They still have to pay attention. And I've got some theories on why the number of PAGA lawsuits still might be going up. One idea is the plaintiff's bar just can't get as much money per case now, so they have to file more of them.
Right.
To keep up, their litigation budget, what they've been doing. So that's one idea. And again, too, if you get an employer out there that's not paying attention and is not showing these good faith efforts to comply with the labor code, the old penalties still apply, 100% of the penalties, so they could still proceed with the PAGA cases. So it's something employers really need to pay attention to and proactively manage going forward here in California.
That just needs to be like the title of the episode is like calling all California restaurant owners, operators, and anything there you touch a restaurant in California. It's such a huge piece. And like you said, if folks don't realize that there are these reforms and if they're not staying proactive, then all of those old fees are going to come back to bite them. And, from what you were saying before, there's a lot of things that people can do to try to stay ahead of this. So, it's great to have it front of mind. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and you know somebody in the restaurant world in California, send this episode to them so they can start being more proactive too.
Yep. No, it's huge. And, to a lot of operators though in California, I'm really impressed and business owners across the board, really impressed how well they know this and know their obligations and what they're doing to comply. But it's something though, and we can get into it if you want, some best steps to reduce and cap those PAGA penalties. One is periodic payroll audits. So I recommend quarterly audits. And these can be done internally. It's not like you have to go hire a lawyer, an HR professional outside your company, but just get your records, look at the time records, make sure everybody's being paid properly, all of their time, it's being recorded properly, overtime is being paid properly. Take a look at the pay stubs. That's another little thing. Labor Code Section 226 requires 9 items to be listed on the pay stub. And you miss one of those 9 items, you're at this $200 per employee per paycheck potentially for a penalty, and it adds up. So, and again, the payroll companies can just, something changed. The minimum wage, for example, is going up across California here July 1st in a lot of local cities and counties. And, just double checking that your payroll company's updating that minimum wage listed on the pay stubs. And if you do change payroll providers, make sure the new payroll providers got all the right information listed. And just double checking that routinely helps. Another key aspect is to establish compliant policies. Make sure you've got the right meal and rest break policies, overtime policies, your handbook's updated at least annually, if not more regularly. And then getting back to that arbitration agreement, your new hire documents that you're giving to employees, arbitration agreement, if you have one, that it's updated, compliant, and enforceable. And then also to get that 15% cap, the reform in PAGA says employers have to actually train their supervisors on wage and hour compliance as well.
Okay. Wow.
So going forward, and it doesn't say how often, who has to do it or anything. So the more, the better, but documenting this too. Hey, we had a meeting with the managers on what to do if somebody missed their meal or rest break, what to do if you think somebody is not clocking in properly, how to fix things like that. And doing that routinely and that training. And then the last thing, the fourth item that the reform sets out is that employers, to the extent they find a manager who's violating company policy or wage and hour laws, the company finds out the manager's doing that they take corrective actions against that manager and document that. So, the instinct is to kind of sweep that under the rug, get that person out and kind of don't admit any wrongdoing. But on the other hand, though, once you find out if you got the bad apple, get rid of them and then document it. And then if you get hit in one of these PAGA cases, it's like, look, whenever we know anything is going bad, we got a bad actor trying to do something, violate our policy, we take care of it right away. Because more often than not, these lawsuits are brought kind of after the fact. The employee never complained while they were working there. And then they got disgruntled. And then it's like, I didn't get my meal and rest breaks. I didn't get paid properly, and on and on. And to the extent the employer can show, hey, if we knew about this stuff, we take action and prompt action. You should have just told us. And that's
like a sign of good faith almost, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's a big defense.
Yeah, that is a big defense. Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned these filings, you mentioned coming up with your facts and your theories, right? A lot of this is speculative. So like the importance of record keeping is so critical in these cases. If only there was a piece of software that kept track of all this, Rich.
I feel like I heard about one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
No, and actually, I was speaking to some restaurant operators down in Orange County last week, and the tech aspect of it and AI, to bring it back to AI, and I know everybody's probably tired of hearing about it, but I'm actually just ginning up talking about it. But the tech, though, that's available to help operators comply with the law, flag potential violations, and document these issues is huge. And if you, again, legally, you don't have to have it. You could do pen and paper, but it's a lot harder to pull that all together when I come in as your lawyer to defend the case and say, okay, we need over the last year or 2 years, or maybe potentially going back 4 years, how did we rectify this when we found out somebody wasn't being paid right or somebody complained? What do we do? And being able to have that on the tip of your fingers, like immediately, is huge in defending these claims.
Not the shoebox full of Post-its and things that I wrote on the back of a napkin.
Signatures, and
right?
No break slips. Yeah,
I kind of joke about
PTSD.
Right. I joke about it, but and we've seen this though, I joke about it, but it is true. When the HR manager has litigation against the company, surprise, their files are always missing. So it's who has access to these files, and it's something to think about. So that's why I like it electronically. You can really lock those down, have backups. And going back to when I was a young attorney, I remember going to, a storage unit, opening it up with boxes upon boxes
everywhere. Yeah.
And looking at each personnel file to get the arbitration agreement. Again, legally, that's fine. If that's all you've got, it's better than nothing. But, it's so much nicer to have this technology available to use that where, hey, for all of my employees for this time period, I need that arbitration agreement. And the software pulls it.
I also love the idea of, you talked about doing a quarterly payroll audit. Like, just grab your payroll records, feed them into an AI bot, and have it do the work for you, right? Like, to your point.
Well, that's the next step. We're doing that audit for clients right now, and it's very time intensive. Totally. We're manually doing it, but AI, you could see it. It's there within the next year, and we're playing around with it, AI feeding it in and training it, and it's really good at math, and it should be able to do this wage and hour compliance audit.
Absolutely.
Like within, in minutes. Yep.
Yeah, it's that same idea, right? Like, it's not trying to replace anybody, but it is going to cut down on the amount of time it takes to do these labor-intensive, time-intensive tasks like that.
Yeah, which, by the way, nobody likes doing, too. When I tell my paralegals, hey, we've got another audit, here's 100, employees' time records. We need to do a damages analysis. Like, it's just tedious. And, to speed that up, being more accurate on that is awesome.
Well, and you were talking about how, part of this reform has been also about having the supervisors be trained on wage and hour compliance. And I'm just thinking about LMS solutions now, right? Like ExpandShare, which we acquired. Like, we should have a whole course in there on all of this, right? I mean, this is obviously critical and to have a paper trail of the training that they went through, right? You can, to your point, Anthony, we're not pulling a signed document out of a file. We've got a digital trail on who did the training when.
And then, the training through the software, everybody got this 30-minute training, and, it's documented, and you got a copy of the training that they had. And it's documented, who was there and that they were there the full 30 minutes. Yeah. But, going back to, it's nothing new too. California employers have had a lot of these obligations already, going back to the sexual harassment prevention training. Yep. Supervisors have had to have 2 hours training. Regular employees have had to have the training too, going back years. So, and there's a lot of software out there to do that training online. So that's good. But again, too, don't overthink it. Just do the training. If it's your manager before the shift to sit down and train people, train other managers, you're doing management pre-shifts, whatever, and just document, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Hey, we talked about how we're scheduling meal breaks, how we're dealing with rest breaks, and just note that. And I'm a big proponent of, we've been doing these webinars through our firm on these issues, wage and hour issues. We issue certificates after the webinar that the employer
Right.
was on, because you're going to have to prove this now to get that penalty. And guess what? Those plaintiffs' attorneys are going to challenge that you're not taking reasonable steps. So you need to show up with more than, hey, I think I watched some webinars by some lawyer throughout the year.
Right.
Show up with some documents. And we've got these certificates, which, by the way, the bar has approved, the state bar has approved our firm to offer MCLE to other attorneys. Attorneys, accountants have to do MCLE. It's almost like continuing education now for employers. It's almost at that point where the employers need to be thinking about that. What am I doing? How am I going to be able to prove that we're staying up with all of the new developments under California Labor Code and documenting it?
Well, and I have to. It's tricky for the smaller groups, right? The mom and pop restaurants, as we like to call them. But at what point do you feel like when is an HR professional sort of a need for a restaurant group?
Yeah, that's a good
Is there a
question.
critical mass you hit where it's like, ooh, it's time to get our ducks in a row?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get that a lot from clients too. When do we have to hire? So legally, there is no requirement that you have an HR professional. Mm-hmm. So, in these small companies, the founder, owner usually wears that hat too. But I think it's something that the founders need to get off of their plate quickly, though, as the company's growing. A couple of reasons. The owner, founders got some bigger issues. Not to say these aren't important, but it's like life and death issues for the company and how to grow the company and keep it alive and meet payroll. Those are critical issues. The owner needs to take his or her time, focus on that, and have somebody double checking you on these details and deadlines. Are we meeting our obligations on, just watching the minimum wage? Is it going up for us? Paid sick leave, are we computing that right? Are we tracking that properly? Somebody asks for a leave. What leave laws apply to us, and how are we going to calculate that? Are we giving the right notices to employees? So it gets very detailed. So it's good to have somebody that knows about that generally and can help with that. And, my gut is like, when you start getting to like 25 employees, you need to start thinking about having somebody on board, or at least outsourcing that to somebody.
I was going to ask about
and
that.
Then
something consultative.
And then at 50 employees, it starts getting to where you need to have somebody internally. It's nice to have somebody internally because they know the stories for each employee, and they're building some knowledge base with the organization. And it's hard to outsource that. When you're having to call somebody, they don't know that employee just went out on pregnancy leave, a few months ago. And they're having family issues. They might approach the situation a little differently than somebody that's kind of knows the employees and has that relationship with the employees. But really 50 plus employees, you really need to have, potentially you could work with it outsourced, but having somebody in the company that knows HR. And then, 100 plus employees, you should have an HR person.
Right.
Yeah, helping out.
Just trying to think of like those companies that have like that many employees and that don't have any kind of a system in place. We see it all the time with, just kind of the back office and things like that. But think about it from that perspective too. Like you might have one location that's got just cranking, has tons and tons of employees, but making sure that you're covering yourself on all aspects of the business.
Yep. Yeah. What have you guys, what are your thoughts on that? Have you seen best practices at all on?
Well, I mean, obviously we've seen a need for an LMS solution across the board, like to train managers on this stuff, to train employees on this stuff. It's one of the reasons we teamed up with ExpandShare, just so we've got that built-in educational piece and everybody's, learning the same content. It's always tricky when you don't have a solution like that in place, and the training at one restaurant could differ greatly from the training at another restaurant. Right? There's no consistency involved. We are seeing an uptick in this like consultative HR role, like not a full-time person, but a lot of the payroll companies now offer this service, right? It's like an add-on, or they've just got an HR professional that they're reaching out to on an hourly basis. They're being billed hourly, depending on, the size of the organization. But,
Yeah, and I
And
think
like
a
I
big part
said,
of it too is like that tracking piece, like you mentioned before, being able not only to, show that somebody, we gave them this certification, this training, but being able to track it, document it, and having access to all that information quickly instead of trying to hunt it down, like you said, pulling filing cabinet, folders and bankers boxes.
Yep. Yep. For sure. And then just having somebody that knows, no, and I hate to be kind of like negative on it, but there's some employees that require more hand holding than others
Yeah.
and know the system and, can game the system different ways. And if you know somebody that knows the rules and how to deal with that, that's super helpful. And it goes back to the old 80-20 rule. And I would say with employees, it's probably less than that though, too. It could be one employee. It's amazing how much time and angst they can create in an organization for, if you've got 100 employee organization, it could be one or two employees that totally take down that organization, suck up all of the HR director's time, even suck up the CEO's time. Being able to manage that effectively and quickly is huge.
You talk about that one bad apple manager, but I would argue, to your point, that one bad apple employee can cause far more damage within the ranks than at a leadership level. I've seen it. Yeah, it just spreads. It's like toxicity. It just spreads rapidly. You're absolutely right. But that's tough, right? Because how do you can't fire somebody for being toxic. How do you start to track that? Because you've got to have such, documentation in place whenever you're terminating an hourly employee, multiple warnings and write-ups, and that's tough to navigate.
Yeah, it is tough. So, under California law, as a reminder, we are still an at-will state. And actually, most states are, except for Montana.
Okay.
Are at will. So, but you're right though. It's better to have that documentation. But if somebody shows up and they're just being toxic all of the time, that's a valid reason to get rid of somebody. Now, you need to be careful though. Having the documentation is always key, and being able to show like, we're being toxic and warning and work. And it usually sits better with the employee too. If you out of the blue fire somebody, they might not understand what happened. And if it wasn't done professionally too, the termination, and they were embarrassed by it, that's usually when I see the litigation come.
Right. They want payback and revenge.
Yeah, exactly. So if you do it with respect and deep down, most people, not everybody, but most people understand, like if they're just not performing well, they know it and they understand what the company's doing. And at the time of the termination, they might not agree with you at the time. They're not going to agree, but in their heart of hearts, a couple of weeks down the road, be like, I wasn't giving my all to that job. Like I could see why they let me go if it's done professionally. But it's tough. But again, too, that's why a good HR professional is really worth a lot. And I think HR professionals don't get the value. It's looked as a cost center, right? In an organization. And I've written a few articles about this, but it's a huge benefit when you get somebody that can, culture, how do you manage culture in a workplace? It's tough and everybody struggles with that. So they're really in charge of culture. And if they're managing the culture right, they're preventing a lot of this litigation and preemptively shutting this down before it becomes an issue. And, what kind of price you put on that, it's worth a ton of money.
It's fine. When I was a restaurant manager, I always used to say, I don't fire people. People fire themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, so kind of like the way that we're talking about it now is like kind of like the end of like someone's employment with us, but I almost kind of like more curious on the other side of things when you're looking for folks, when you're trying to screen, new applicants, trying to sort through resumes all the way through like that hiring process. I mean, what are some of the other things or insider secret tips, tricks and things like that folks could take away from this as far as like hiring people, I-9 compliance, things like that, the mundane stuff that people get lost in, but is so necessary to make sure you're protecting yourself and your business.
Ask them if they've ever been in a PAGA
Yeah, yeah. No, you
Question
wish,
one.
right?
Do you know the word PAGA?
Right, right. Do you know how to spell PAGA?
Yeah.
If they do, it's like,
Uh-oh.
So employers, in California, and can't look at any prior litigation if the employees filed litigation or anything like that. So can't use that in making a determination to hire or not hire somebody. So that's tricky. Yeah. And I don't know. I struggle with this issue too, how to pick people out in an interview. And even for my firm internally, it's just hard. You think somebody looks great on paper, they interview great, and they show up and you realize it's just not a good fit. So it's difficult. And, a lot of business.
That culture piece is tough to nail down, right? Like,
Yep. And to get to how they're going to play with others once they're in the organization, you really, I don't know. I can't predict it. And I've seen a lot of people that are a lot better at this than me. I hear Gary Vaynerchuk talking about it, and he's very high EQ and can read people well. But he says he can't get it right. And it's not until you start working with the people,
Right.
a couple weeks into it, do you see that? So fortunately in California, we're at will. So you can terminate somebody if it's just not working out. And as I'm getting older, I think it's better to act on that sooner. I used to try to nurse that along, correct that person and get them. But sometimes it's just personality. They're not going to change. And of reading some business books, one book I really like is Ready, Fire, Aim. And the author on that book is saying, look, even the best out of the best in choosing people to hire, maybe get it 75% of the right, but you're more the 50-50. So, don't assume that you've got this turnover, that you're a bad manager or you hire the wrong people. It's just part of the process. And, I'm kind of, as I'm getting older, resolving that's part of the process, finding out who the team members are. Not to say these people you're letting go aren't great workers. It just, again, the culture and how you've set it up and everything, they're just
exactly not a great fit.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously there's some gains to be had here with AI again in terms of like scrubbing resumes and looking, picking out those applicants that might, rise to the top. But at the end of the day, it is still, you can't spell HR without human, right? You can't remove that part of the process. You need to have that connection.
Yeah, and Mark, like scrubbing the resumes, AI, talking about AI, California is actually considering legislation and regulations over,
of course they are,
companies using AI to do that. And and I've got mixed feelings about it, but and again too, I don't, and then once it becomes an AI issue, like everybody should be using AI to write their resume. So it's AI checking other AI.
Right.
And it's going to become kind of like, negligible there anyway. So, so it comes down, to the people and the interview, but it's hard. And so going back to the HR managers or hiring managers, don't be too hard on yourself on that. And California law, does allow people to, terminate people for any reason, no reason, just not an illegal reason. So, and the illegal reasons coming back to those protected categories, race, gender, national origin. Yeah. So I don't know. As I'm, thinking about it more and more, kind of within those like first month or two, if you realize it's not a good fit. And I think you can make that determination pretty quickly, have that discussion up front. And then I think the employee is a little less inclined to have, this built-in affinity towards the company. Like, why I've been here for a year. Why are you letting me go now? It's like, hey, it's been a month. We just realized, sorry. And then you can offer severance, make it very generous,
amicable,
easy. And professional, so the employee doesn't have any hard feelings too. So, but it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, so from a software perspective, right? We try to attack labor, just obviously being the system of record for a lot of this stuff, but also like how can we be more predictive in how we're modeling labor? Because to your point, minimum wage is going up, right? It's a very expensive cost center, probably more so than food now, right? Labor is probably the most expensive cost center in the restaurant for most operators. So we try from a software standpoint to figure out how to control that, how to curb that, how to be predictively modeling it. You know, we're seeing a lot of this fair work week stuff coming out of New York, and like, how can operators sort of get in front of that? Is there an easy answer there? I don't know.
Yeah, not an easy answer, but going back to what I mentioned off the start of the podcast, though, how sophisticated operators are now on these regulations and the laws, you almost have to be at that level now. If you it's not something you can delegate, kind of contradicting myself a little bit, but you need to be involved. Like just with labor, it's such a huge part of your P&L now. You need to understand what goes into that and manage that. And if you're not hitting your goals, it's going to ruin your company. So it's just as big as, balancing your checkbook and running a valid P&L. So managing that, knowing where your wages are going. And I've seen the most successful operators here in California with the Fast Food Act going through and the $20 minimum wage, which might go up even higher here soon at the beginning of 2025. Just getting super granular on where that money is going and scheduling employees and being tight on it. And they've really tightened up their belts, the best operators I've worked with. And it's actually turned out to be cost savings for them now, how they're operating their business. And that's unfortunate because who's really paying the costs on this are the employees. And the legislators don't recognize that. They think this $20 minimum wage is going to help all the workers. In effect, it becomes so expensive to have, an operator could just be like, okay, we'll have a couple extra people throughout the week just to manage it in case we have that rush. Now that's out the door.
Right.
And,
exactly.
The hours are cut back. And I wish the legislators would understand this, that when it's not such a high per hour cost, operators, business owners just want to have the extra people there to manage some of this and give better service. But at some point, you're tying their hands when it becomes this expensive, and they've got to watch that labor component so tight. So the operators that I've seen doing well are just really on top of it, using technology, tightening up that wage and hour component.
Rich, what are you hearing from people on the at the beginning of their sort of software journey? Like, what, from a labor standpoint, what seems to be the most critical piece that people are missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of folks, it's how do I tighten up my labor? How do I kind of cut? But like you said, it's more. Not even trying to cut it. It's kind of reframing it to people of like, well, you're trying to cut down your labor costs, but really it's because you're scheduling people the wrong way. You're bringing them in too early. You're keeping them too late, during those softer periods of the day. So really looking at your business, I've said it before, like, restaurants were the last stand for technology. Everything was handwritten tickets and, cash registers. And then we slowly started moving into POS and more systems. And now you have all of that info. But for a lot of people, it's too much data for them to be able to really get into it and figure it out. So finding some of those ways to help kind of pick it apart and make good decisions based off of that info. And, if it's somebody who's owning their own place, trying to do it all, it's got to be quick and easy for them, especially to, be mindful of everything else that's going on the day to day.
And Anthony, that's where I really see AI having an opportunity, right? Providing those insights to the operator, so they don't have to go do the dirty work to figure out where they got it wrong.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, and you could see that writing's on the wall within the next year. I think that's going to be there to help. Yeah, and it should know, all these laws for you, California, but even local city, county laws should apply. And I mean, it's almost there. We're building out agents to help us and advising clients, but it should be able to figure this out shortly. But I did want to ask you guys, though, too, on that predictive scheduling, what are you seeing? So, knock on wood, on California state level, we don't have that. Different industries or localities here in California has it. But what are you guys seeing on that front? And, have you had much experience with that, with clients, with predictive scheduling and how that is playing out?
From our side, we manage it in a couple of ways. One is obviously forecasting is the beginning of the journey for everybody, right? Figuring out what your targets are for that week, setting goals. We've got clients doing it with revenue. We've got clients doing it with entree counts as well. That seems to be pretty popular, right? Because especially for these fast casual concepts, these QSRs, it's more about number of bodies it takes to produce the product, not just serve the guest, right? So they're trying to figure out, okay, for 100 tacos, how many cooks do I need in the kitchen between 1 and 2? And really they're getting down to like the 15-minute increment now. That seems to be this, like they want to control their labor down to the 15-minute increment. So once their forecast is in, then we have a labor matrix where they can basically tell it like, okay, for X number of dollars or entrees, I know I need this many bodies. And then that gets applied to the schedule. So as they're writing it, we sort of have guardrails in place now for the manager. So they don't over or under schedule based on whatever that forecasted model is. And it's working well, but I do think, again, there's an opportunity for AI to come in at some point and be like, here, I'm just going to write your schedule for you.
Right. Yeah, with some oversight from the manager. Yeah. Just kind of like, and I've noticed AI, it's good getting you 80, maybe 90% of the way there, but it's still good to have somebody that knows the area you're looking at to like tweak it. Sometimes some legal issues, like you have no idea where it's coming up with this answer totally wrong. And what's hard about it, it looks great, right? It's all, but you're just like, well, I don't know where that came from, but but it's getting there. But I'm worried about the predictive scheduling here in California. We've been looking at that issue. They've been trying to pass that on the state level for a while, but like I said, knock on wood, it hasn't been passed on the state level. But keeping an eye on that here in California.
Yeah, we're just from a software standpoint, it's something we're just starting to dig into because, like I said, it started in New York. We'll see if it starts to sort of spread. But obviously, software is definitely the answer to the majority of these problems.
For sure.
But to your point, there is that extra 20% that only the person within the four walls is going to understand, right? That manager is going to know.
Exactly.
Oh, there's this, there's this event, or there's a construction, or there's a weather, or I know that this family comes in every Friday after there's, But there's certain things that you just can't teach software, I think.
Yep. That's cool. Yeah. And then, and sorry to kind of focus on the wage and hour issue so much.
That's why we're here.
It's huge. It's important. We say it's behind the numbers. That's the biggest thing behind the numbers.
That's the numbers. Yeah. And I'm trying to think other kind of trending issues that we've been seeing here in California, and this is the wage and hour issue is so big. And I tell our clients, focus on that. That is bet the company litigation, these PAGA claims, the class actions, take care of that. And then if you have an individual, wrongful termination case, discrimination case, an individual wage and hour case, even, it's going to suck. But it's not a bet the company kind of thing. And versus we get into millions of dollars pretty easily once you start adding up those PAGA penalties under that the old paradigm. I've got an example that I walked through on some of my webinars, even just 200 employees during a 100 employees over a 2-year pay period, a 2-year statute of limitations. And for those $100 per employee per pay period violations, you can get over $2 million pretty easily.
Wow.
Under the PAGA penalties. So it's something employers, need to pay attention to. But with that reform, it's good. And so we focus on that with a lot of our clients. And then, managing these other cases as they come up with somebody with a leave issue, accommodation for a disability, accommodation for illness, something like that. As it comes up. But that's where, something an operator can call, an outside human resource person. Even my firm, we've got some clients, we act kind of like an outsourced in-house counsel. If something tricky comes up, their HR manager doesn't know, they call us and run it by us and we help. And having these experts like that and knowledgeable like you guys too, to rely on and get this best practices is key for an operator. You can't do this by yourself.
No, it takes a village.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, I think it does translate to the bottom line, right? If you've got a well-run operation, you've got a strong management team, you've got happy employees, then you've got happy right? Like
Yeah.
it's a trickle down. It absolutely has to be. That's
Yeah.
the other reason to do it, right?
Yeah.
Profits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, and then even beyond profits, I would say the culture, kind of coming back to culture and how hard that is to build. Like what you're going through, happy employees, happy customers. That's all this culture. That's what we were talking about. How to manage that team, how to get the right people on your team, how to keep them. And that's where the HR function is so critical. And I don't think it gets all the credit it deserves. And it's such a hard, and I call it an art too. It's really an art, versus, the finance, like plug the numbers in, they work or they don't. And,
very black and white. Yeah. Very zeros and ones.
You get an accountant that's fixed and, tell you where the numbers are wrong or something, where you need to improve. Like that's pretty easy. But when the culture goes sideways in an organization, how to fix that, it's tough. And especially when you're dealing with hundreds of employees, I don't envy a lot of my clients, even sometimes with thousands of employees. How to fix culture on that level is really tough.
That sort of change management, is very hard to affect.
Yeah.
And once it hits a certain point, can you change it back to the way it was before? Do you have to try to find some new version of normal? Instead of just trying to kind of keep things on course, you find a whole new way.
Yep. Yeah, so, for sure.
Anthony, I know you have a podcast as well. I've heard. Is that rumor true?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
It's the legal lineup. No, I've just been enjoying that, doing that. And it's weird. I say enjoying it. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know why the people are going to want to hear the lawyer. I just had a friend of mine, business contact. He's a brand strategist on, and it was one of the most insightful podcasts I've been thinking back to lately. But talking about culture, we started talking about how to use branding for employee culture and everything.
It's a big part of it.
Yep.
100%. Like, employees want to feel like they're working at a place that, I don't want to say makes a difference, but the culture of where you work has become a very important factor, I think, to the workforce today. It's not just about getting a paycheck anymore. They want to feel like they're part of something greater than that, for sure.
Yep. No, and internally, I was telling myself this story, like, it's not important, and why am I messing around with these little issues? I should be litigating, right, and doing these important things. But it comes back to like building a culture in the firm and doing these little things. It adds up to having, some cool swag when your employee starts working. They feel appreciated. And just all these little things add up to be your brand for your company and what you guys stand for. And so I've learned a lot having people onto the podcast and just different people. We focus on a lot, obviously, on employment a lot, but we've had business, restaurant operators and everything. It's been fun. It's been really cool.
Well, we always like to wrap these things up with sort of a hot take on the industry. So I'm curious, something you love, something you hate happening in hospitality right now? I feel like we might have touched on one or two of them already.
I know. I'm trying to think about something new. But, the reason why, so I'm not a foodie by heart and how I got into the industry. So I would say about 70% of our clients in the firm are hospitality related. And really got sucked into the industry, but I don't know all the celebrity chefs by heart. I don't know all the new restaurants, and my wife and I actually don't go out, and I probably shouldn't admit this a lot, but we are pretty homebody types of people, and it's just tough once I've got kids and working and everything. But I do like the industry and the people in the industry, and once I got sucked into it, I couldn't get out too, and everybody's just so friendly to deal with, and the hospitality side of it, like, it's just awesome to be involved. And the creativity, though, in the industry, I think is unmatched, from starting a restaurant to all these aspects that we just covered. And then you got these restaurateurs that are expert attorneys, expert accountants, expert HR people, expert marketers. It's amazing when you meet these people and what they can do. And so that's been why I just keep sticking around and coming back and doing what I do. But I love learning from everybody, and I learn from everybody all the time, all my clients and stuff. And it's just fascinating to see when they're starting these businesses, how they've done it, and what they've done and how they keep operating. And then, here in California, we've got this regulatory complex like sitting over them, and then they're still killing it. Some of the best in the country.
Absolutely.
And super sophisticated. And it's just awesome to see that.
That's a great hot take. I love it. And that's why we see so many of these successful brands start in California, because if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
1,000%.
Anthony, I feel like we could talk about this for another hour or so, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to find out more, connect with Anthony and his practice, Zaller Law Group PC. They're on LinkedIn. Also, there's a podcast, as you found out today, that you can check out that I'm sure will be on at some point. But yeah, thank you so much for being here today. Boy, Rich, take us out.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank all of you at home for listening and tuning in. We hope you have a great shift, a great week, a great quarter, wherever you and your restaurant may be. And don't forget, if you got time to lean, you got time to listen while you clean. So remember to like and subscribe everywhere. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen. You can also find us across social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. And of course, you can always visit us at restaurant365.com. Thanks again so much. Great hanging out with you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
With that,
Thanks,
we are
guys.
clocking out.